This Week in Post, unscripted, uncut, it's a live edit. Hey everyone, I'm Scott Davenport. Welcome to In Post. Today we're going to do a start-to-finish unscripted editing of a photo I took during my last San Diego Coastlines workshop. Before I dive into the machine here and start working on the photo, I want to get your photo questions. Leave comments in the video below, send them in through my website. Your questions are more valuable than you can imagine. In addition to me hopefully helping you out and getting you an answer to one of your photo questions, it also makes me think about my photography, gives me some ideas of what else to share here, and we all get better together. That's the whole point. So let's take a look at today's photo. So shot this toward the tail end of the workshop, and what captured my eye is these triangular rocks. These are actually some of my favorites along San Diego, but this nice amount of swirl in the foreground. Decided to go vertical with the composition. So let's do a quick image assessment. Overall, I'm pretty happy with composition. There's a little bit of straightening that needs to happen on the horizon, and maybe play with the crop. I'm not sure about this little bit of a brighter, amberish orange colored rock there, but I do like what's in the background there. So we'll see what happens after some basics here. And I'm torn on whether or not to leave the surfer out there yet or not. It's not incredibly recognizable, so that may go away. After that, it's going to be contrasting, a little bit of color, and really playing up these swirls in the foreground. So that's what we're going to try and do. Let's start off with our lens corrections. And for those curious, I don't need to turn on chromatic aberration because my camera happens to apply that in camera and it doesn't do anything, right? It's no harm. I can turn it on and off, but there's no change to the photo because the chromatic aberration is taken care of. All right, next let's deal with the horizon. Hit the R key for the crop, and let's do auto. It should just find it right away. Pretty good. All right, now that's ended up trimming some of this a little bit on the edge. Let's tighten up the crop just a little bit and see how that looks. Actually, let me show you this. I'm going to do R key again for the crop tool. I'm pressing L, and what that does is it lets you take a look at your crop in a different way here. You've got some of the distractions removed. You're using that dark preview mode in Lightroom and lets you see the crops there. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to trim off that little tiny bit of rock there. This doesn't bother me there. I've got enough space here that this rock doesn't feel crowded. You press L 2 more times, bring that back around. I'm going to call that good. Next, dust spots. So the Q key for clone heal, kind of set to heal. And in the toolbar, if you don't see that, press T on your keyboard. There is this visualize spots. I turn that on. Looks like I got one spot way up there and maybe something here. We'll have to take a look at that. But I'll turn that off for a minute. Let's see, that definitely looks like something, and I wouldn't be able to see that otherwise. The A key will toggle visualize spots off and on. So I'm going to do that. Make my brush a little bigger, take care of that guy, and make the brush a little smaller, and take care of that spot there. A to turn that off, and Q to exit the retouch tool. All right, that looks good. I'm still going to keep the surfer there for now and maybe decide that toward the very end whether or not to keep it. All right, let's move on to some basic adjustments. So histogram's looking good. Nice spread on the histogram. So there's not going to be any work. I'll need to do an exposure. I'll start with blacks and white points. So Option or Alt key if you're on a PC. We'll nudge that up so we see some cut. Looks like up in the sky. Back that off. Get some of the darker blacks. There's already a couple of spots there. That's good. Open up the shadows a little bit. I don't want too much. I like the richer shadows here. It emphasizes the directional light. The sun is off to camera right. Let's pull the highlights back some. Getting a tiny bit of texture, color. I don't know what really to call it in the sky. There's nothing happening in the sky that day. That's one of the reasons it is pushed all the way to the top of the frame and really minimized. That's all right. I'm going to press V now for black and white while I adjust contrast. Just I can see the contrast a little better when I work in black and white. And now, as I've adjusted contrast, I may bring those shadows back up so I don't lose the detail on the rocks. V key to turn it off. That looks good. A little bit of clarity. And that's Not going to go too far. I don't want to push too hard on that. And then maybe a touch of vibrance. These are already very vibrant colors as it stands. I think I'm pretty happy at that point there. Let's tone down the sky a little bit. Graduated filter, drag one of those and kind of just position it there. Let's now get the style of that brush. So we'll start with some exposure and reducing that some. If I go too far, it's going to get a little bit awkward looking. Somewhere around there is not bad. We can even cool it down a little bit. I don't want to cool it too much because there is a band of yellowish at the horizon where the haze was. That's pretty all right. And this is starting to take shape pretty well. I think I am going to remove our surfer friend. So I'm going to hit the Q key and just make that brush nice and small. Right there. Take it away. You know what? Let's do that a little more precisely. Let's delete that. We'll zoom into that area. Now I'll get my Q key. Yeah, this is a good choice to take this away. This was a 2-second exposure, I think it was. Yeah, 2 seconds. So this guy's moving around quite a bit, and it just kind of looks like a blob. So how's that looking? That's better. That's actually, I'm going to take that as acceptable. And maybe pop the feather up a little bit on that brush selection there. Space it out a little more. And I'm going to call that good. All right. Zoom back out. We'll turn off the spot healing tool there. And I think just to finish this up, I want to add a little more crispness into the rocks and some in the foreground too. And possibly even some vibrance in the foreground. I think I'm going to be able to do this just in Lightroom. And so I'll switch over to the brush. Let's preload a brush. Let's sharpness is good. We'll add some clarity there. And in this brush, maybe a little bit of saturation. So I'm going to brush this into just the water in the foreground. And the saturation is going to bring out some of those hints of color that happen to be in there. All right, there we go. Got the brush loaded up. Increase it pretty big and just kind of sweep through the foreground here like that. And I had the flow pretty high, density pretty high. So that's going to give a pretty healthy amount of brush there. All right, that looks pretty good. Do I want to do any more here? Just another extra amount in the center there, perhaps. Let's see if that's before and after is really making a... Yeah, that's richer. I think the clarity is a little bit too much. It's getting... The shadows are getting kind of black. I don't want that. Let's see before and after again on that particular brush. That's better. That's better. What's dehaze going to do for me? Dehaze is terrible. Don't do that. That's a bad idea. There really much else I have control over detail here. I don't want... It's a balancing act. I don't want too much. At the same token, I want a little bit of accentuation on those fingers of water. So before, after. Shadows still feel a little bit dark, so I'll nudge that up a tiny bit. Actually, now that I'm looking at it or thinking about it, what about, oh, there we go. A little bit of warmth. Not a lot. There's still, it's still a blue sky afternoon, but we know that there's sunshine, so we can see those colors in the rocks. We see that sun hitting there. I can play that up a little bit on that foreground just to set it apart a little more, and warmer colors are going to jump out to our eyes more. Cooler colors are going to retreat. I've probably said that before. And that will also add a little depth to our scene too. So just that touch of warmth, I think, is going to be a good thing. Yep. Let's see. Fine tune that. Maybe back the sharpness off a little bit. I don't want to get too dark and crunchy in there. Okay. Similar idea. We're going to do a new brush, and this one will just be for the rocks. Let's reset that and maybe just tiny bit of contrast and clarity. Lower that down and then brush through the rock area. And I don't have to do all the rocks. I mainly want to do these foreground rocks. And I'm not using an edge detection brush or anything. These are kind of just lazy strokes through here. For this, it doesn't need to be perfect. That's going to be sufficient. We can take a look and see where we covered. That's pretty good. Maybe catch this little bit of rock right there. And let's see a before and after on that, paying attention to the rocks. Of course, I'm seeing what's happening in the foreground more often, so here's how we'll do it. We'll take that pin, and I will delete it, and then I will undo it. Okay, seeing the difference here, let's nudge that clarity up a little bit more and that contrast up a tiny bit more. I'll play with shadows very quickly. That's too much. I want to call that good. Last but not least, some type of vignette would be in order. I can't resist adding a vignette, so I will switch this to the color priority. I've noticed that tends to be a little more forgiving when it comes to the edges when you've got uniform colors up here. Roundness, let's make that not so round, and we'll shrink it down ever so slightly. Feather that back up, actually maybe all the way. And now the amount needs to back off a little bit so it's not too obvious in those upper corners. Before and after on the vignette. That's nice, that's subtle enough. All right, let's see from the beginning here. So here's the backslash key. This is what we started with, and that's where we finished. And I think I'm going to call that one good. If this were a day where there was a more stellar sky, I'd probably be spending more time on this one and really digging in and fine-tuning with dodging and burning, especially in those foreground water areas. But given the conditions, I'll save my energies for another photo on another day that's got the the killer composition along with killer conditions. So for a tip of the week, I would say that using multiple brushes in Lightroom is a good thing. You can add, stylize, isolate certain segments of your photo from one another. Previewing them individually, that's an area I'd love to see Lightroom improve in. But you saw that I could do a workaround of picking a pin, deleting it, and then undoing the delete as a kind of a before and after view. So if you have a photo where you need to give different treatments to different areas and you're only working in one tool, take a look at whatever the brush tools are and see about adding more than one and changing the style of each brush to suit the different areas of your photo. Well, thanks a lot for watching this in-post video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please share this with a friend, your camera club, anybody in your photographic world that you think would get some value out of this. And again, if you have questions, please send them on in to me. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, my name is Scott Davenport, and happy shooting. Blah. Try that again. Try that again. For a tip of the week, I suppose would sound like Porky Pig. Mel Blanc, you would be proud.